Another consideration to consider is whether a minister or a church's approach to spirituality is traditional or innovative. I recall one church with whom I worked briefly that was very proud of being very progressive and very upbeat and very modern. They would have guitars and drums playing along to the music in the service. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, but what I found a bit quirky about it is that they kept defining themselves as being out of the box. And over time what I began to see is that they weren't so much out of a box. They were out of the box of traditional institutionalized religion, but they had simply created their own new box, because anyone who was not interested in doing a worship service according to the style that they employed was not particularly welcome within their ministerial steering committee, that and in some sense not particularly welcome within their community. In working with that church, I discovered there were some elderly people in the congregation who really missed the traditional services with the pipe organ. And pipe organ is a wondrous instrument if it is played well. And to be able to enjoy that music and to enjoy the reverence and the depth that they recalled from their childhood and early adult years, because they had been in that church a long time. And my heart went out to them, but I wasn't able to find anything I could do for them, because I wasn't enough of an organist to simply stage a service on my own, and the rest of the ministerial staff didn't seem to support that. But everything had migrated so much to the modern contemporary approach that they were now attending because that was their tradition to attend. That's where they'd been. It was the only church they'd known for years. And so they continued attending even though the church changed. And I'm sure they got some sort of blessing out of the new style of worship also. But there was no allowance by the church to provide what would have been inspirational and helpful to those members of the congregation. My opinion was simply, they're members of the congregation. We need to meet their needs. This is about serving the work, not serving the church's new identity. But that's a criticism? No, not exactly criticism. It's a comment that could relate to all bodies of worship in every religion. To what extent are we paying attention to who's there and what they need, and giving them what they need so that they can become more empowered practitioners of whatever particular faith that church serves? Another thing to keep in mind as we're discussing all these different modalities and all these different ways of doing worship and all these different ways of forming a church or being a minister is that the needs shift from time to time, that a diverse ministerial response is required, that some days ministers will be asked to facilitate a social institution, and at other times they will be asked to provide guidance to the pursuit of spiritual growth. That in addition to all that, there will be times when they need to help maintain their religious system, because if there is no church in which to meet, no communication line such as a church newsletter, the ministry of the church and the relationship between the administration and its members will clearly suffer. The dark side of some of these things, though, is when we allow them to become limitations rather than ideally just the empowerments. If, for example, one is concerned with the preservation of a religious or spiritual perspective, does this mean that we're not allowed to see anything else? What if the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the sacred circle or whatever recognizes this approach and only this approach to the divine? And what if the divine opts or decides to communicate with an individual who is present at that meeting in a way that is outside of the expectations of the ministerial staff. Are they supposed to say, shame on you, God, you weren't supposed to do that. We had a nicely organized service, and you stepped into our service and made a mess of things by giving this person a vision or an experience that really wasn't part of our program. It obviously is extremely absurd suggestion to even make. In a similar fashion, if a minister becomes primarily concerned with sustaining a moral standard, how do we facilitate developing discernment in the membership so that they're able to make wise and loving choices during what you might call contextual exceptions? As if saying, this is wrong unless if for example, okay, if you say it is wrong to kill except in moments of self-defense, that's an exception to a moral rule. The question then becomes, was it self-defense or not? A controversial law in Colorado was the one that said if someone breaks into your home, you don't have to wait to find out whether they're armed or not before you defend yourself with lethal force. If someone breaks into your home, you're allowed to kill them, and that is considered defense of yourself because you didn't know whether they had a gun or not, and you weren't going to flip on the light and do a search before determining that yes, you should take action to do something because you might get killed in the meantime. It's judgment calls like that where we have to say, yes, what is the context? And what is the answer? Well, it depends. What is the context? To be effective people of faith, we have to be able to look at what the context of a situation is and then use discernment to determine what is right or wrong in that situation to the best of our ability. We don't have all the information. We have to make our best guess because life remains a very unpredictable place. It does not, for that reason, however, have to be a fearful or frightened or defensive or paranoid place because there are other situations where it's not just about criminal activity, it's also about discernment of positive things. Is it better to do this or is it better to do that?